Hello and welcome. You tune into India Tonight with me, Ankita Saxena, and with me is Shibani Gharat. In the next 1 hour, we'll take you what is transpiring on the geopolitical front and what are the cues to watch out for. But the top story on the geopolitical front, Shibani, is nothing short of a movie. We saw the Venezuelan president who got captured by the US.
Absolutely.
And that's the top story. And
an operation that has been planned for months put together.
Absolutely. As we speak, the deposed Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro and his wife are being taken to New York courthouse, where he will face charges of drug trafficking. The couple were transported under armed guard from the Brooklyn jail, where they have been detained, while all eyes will be on the court proceedings as to what will be the next for Maduro. The late-night raid by the U.S. to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has surprised everyone and has changed geopolitics on the first weekend of 2026.
Absolutely. And this, Ankita, was almost like akin to the Osama bin Laden kind of a capture, where they trained and practiced this capture in the United States for months put together. And India also is cautious and has taken a wait and watch approach over this capture. Now, Russia and China have openly condemned the US action. But the crux of the entire debate is Venezuela's oil reserve. Now, Trump has openly said that America wants full access to it. Listen in to what Trump said.
In charge of Venezuela right now. Have you spoken to the newly sworn in president there, Rodriguez? And what are your thoughts on the entire situation? You said the U.S. would run Venezuela.
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
We're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
No, I haven't, but other people
Do you want
have.
to?
Yeah, at the right time I will.
And well, on this big topic tonight, we are discussing with Jayant Krishna, who's a Senior Fellow, Center of Strategic and International Studies, who's now joining us, Arnab Das, Global Macro Strategist, EMEA Invesco, and Ashok Sajanhar, who's the former ambassador, who are joining us. Good evening, all the gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're discussing an important story that has transpired over the weekend, nothing short of a movie. You know, we all know now that this was not about reasserting democracy or human rights. This was all about a very strategic, reassertment of power on trade and energy. But this really changes a lot on the geopolitical front. I will start with you, Mr. Sajanhar. What is going to change as far as US's geopolitical dominance is concerned? Now, we have seen certain countries backing it and certain against it, and we'll come to that and how that transpires on oil and the dollar. But first up, what are going to be the implications as far as the geopolitics is concerned?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. And as you said very rightly, this whole thing, meaning it might have been narco-terrorism, democracy, etc., might have been some sort of a smoke screen, might have been some sort of a facade. But actually what Mr. Maduro had been saying right from the beginning, it was all about regime change, and it was all about oil assets and the other assets that Venezuela has. That having been said, I think the precision, the surgical precision with which this whole operation has been carried out, I think that has definitely, that is kudos to the United States, Mr. Trump. It could have gone the wrong way also. You remember 1961 Bay of Pigs, what happened? That was a fiasco. 1980, Jimmy Carter, when he tried to rescue the people from, the hostages from Iran, that was a fiasco. So it could have gone wrong. So it was a high stakes adventurism initiative, but it has turned out right. So I think definitely Mr. Trump can take all the credit for it. And, his stock in the world has in that sense gone up. Also, his stock amongst the MAGA crowd has gone up because, he's been able to do this. He's been talking about it, and the whole world was in fact speaking about as to what is going to be the impact, how is he going to get into Venezuela, because he doesn't want to put boots on the ground. He doesn't want to have body bags coming back. So I think the manner in which he's been able to get it done, that of course, 100% marks as far as Mr. Trump is is concerned. That having been said, I think the real question now is the day after. You know what you showed as to who's in charge. And first, Mr. Trump had said that Mr. Rubio has spoken, and the Vice President, Delcy Rodrigo, has said, I am willing to do everything that the United States wants. And he said that she doesn't have any choice. But we have seen subsequent commentary coming out of Caracas, what she has said, what the Vice President, she's been sworn in as the acting president, what the Interior Minister has said, that we are not going to be subservient to any other empire. They have been a part of the Spanish Empire for 300 years, from 1500 onwards till the beginning of the 19th century. And they are not willing to be subservient to any other empire. So I think how stability is going to be established, how peace and security is going to be established, and how they are going to exploit all the oil resources and all the oil assets. I think that is going to be the big question, and on that will depend the success of this venture, of this initiative.
All right. Moving over to Mr. Krishna, thanks for patiently waiting for your turn. Let me just simply ask you, NATO members like Canada and several European nations are also expressing apprehensions against U.S. Taking charge of Venezuela, according to Trump. So is U.S. risking sort of a schism with these traditional democratic allies to secure the immediate neighborhood and also Venezuelan oil reserves?
See, let's understand, first of all, this is one of the most controversial interventions in another country's sovereign rights and the geography since the invasion by the US, since the invasion of Panama almost 37 years ago, right? So it's not that everything was hunky-dory in Venezuela. I mean, we all know how poorly the country ranks. Look at any international global rankings on corruption, on freedom of press, on civil liberties, on crime, or on unemployment, on poverty, inflation, starvation. They perform very, very badly as the country. And the fact is, the President Maduro, he is known to be authoritative, a dictator. He's also alleged to have done lots of electoral frauds, human rights abuses, and huge amount of economic hardships to the people, but the whole thing is, all the villainy that he showed and the all the bad elements of the regime notwithstanding, right? Should US as the world's largest superpower, should it really invade a country and say that it's going to run it, for some time? I think that is something which lots of people, as you rightly mentioned, if you look at Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Uruguay, all these Latin American countries, Spain, among the BRICS countries, the major ones like China, Russia, they have all been very, very critical of the move. UN itself has come down heavily. They said that it's a dangerous precedence, because now what will happen? Russia would say that our invasion of Ukraine is justified. China would also flex its territorial muscles even more than what it has been doing in the recent past, right? So I think the truth is today, UN has become such a lame duck, such an ineffective global body, right? That, it is waiting till today to convene a special session to discuss Venezuela, right? And no matter what they discuss, whatever they decide, it will not be binding on the US at all, right? US would do anything it takes to make America great again. Something what President Trump has always been talking about, and on the plank under which he got re-elected this time, after a gap of 4 years. So I think it is unfortunate what has happened. Not that things in Venezuela were at a very, very bad shape. Can you tell me a single country who's which is very, very rich in oil reserves, and yet the people are suffering? The economy is so poorly managed. I mean, Venezuela is known to have the world's highest reserves of crude oil, right? But as an oil exporting country, it is not even in top 5. So what is preventing itself? I think that is very, very important. And one more thing I wanted to add is, it's all about money, honey, as they say. It's all about economics at the end of the day, about oil. I think as everybody has been talking about, right? So let's understand the difference, right? US, most of the refineries that US has made investments in are actually for heavier crude, right? Largely speaking, crude oil is of two kinds, heavier and the lighter one. Their investment is in the heavier one. But the US's oil reserves, which they, those are largely, especially those which have been found in the last couple of decades, are of the lighter crude, right? The lighter crude can't be processed in the heavier crude refineries that US has invested in, right? And Venezuela is the world's largest supply, source of heavier crude oil, right? Kind of a thing. So eventually they want that the heavier crude from Venezuela should start flowing into the US refineries, which was not happening because of the economic sanctions, because of the lots of issues between the two countries. So I think now that channelization would start again, and US perhaps would import that heavier crude from Venezuela in large quantities, process it and sell it at a much higher price in the international market. So I think that is what the game is. Appears to be rather than just drug abuse or narco terrorism, and all conspiracy to import cocaine, drug trafficking, whatever you may talk about. Those are all truths. There's nothing wrong in what President Trump has said. But the underlying ambition, to my mind, would be to have a control over Venezuela's crude, and especially the heavier crude, that they have in abundance.
Right, absolutely. That has been the point of discussion. And Arnab, let me come to you for this. Now, history has it, whoever controls the flow of oil dominates the global trade. And with Venezuela having, reserves of 1/5 of the world's oil, it has been supplying and challenging US's dollar dominance. It has been actually tethering dollar dominance by supplying oil to China in yuan. Now, with US taking control, if it is going to take control of Venezuelan oil, how are the oil prices going to move? Because as I can see right now, the oil prices have ticked up 1%. Even Brent and WTI both are trading up 1% in trade right now.
Yeah, look, so I think, the oil part of the story here, I agree with a lot of things that have been said, but maybe would put some slightly different macro and financial kind of emphasis on the events here. I think oil is a big part of the story, but it's not the only part of the story. The only story that's going on here, a lot of different angles. Now, on oil itself, I think it's going to take quite some time before Venezuelan oil starts flowing in large quantities into the global market or the US market, right? The reality is that, as has been said, Venezuela is the world's largest holder of proven reserves, but its production has been declining for decades because under the Chavez government, they really undermined PDVSA, the national oil company, and that undermining continued under his successor, Maduro, right? So the country went from being a very prosperous, albeit unequal country, as has been said, to a terrible place to live and be born and to try and survive. So, the damage that has been done to Venezuela's oil fields is going to take considerable amount of investment and time to fix and to get the oil flowing, because this has been in a bad situation, deteriorating situation for a few decades now, since the late 1990s, right? So I think the story here would be some long-term downward pressure on the price of oil rather than in the short term. And that's why I think oil, like you said, it's ticked up a bit, but it's not a huge move considering what's happened. There's not going to be an early end to the quarantine, as Secretary of State Rubio called it on Venezuelan oil for practical reasons as well as political reasons, right? So I think that control over the supply of oil and its pricing, whether in dollars or and payment in won, that's going to come later, right? And I think, possibly, you can make a case that this is ambiguous for dollar dominance. I don't think it really changes the picture very much precisely because Venezuela is such a small player in terms of oil flows at the market, even if the stocks of reserves are very high. And I think, this is why there hasn't been all that much reaction in the markets to what, after all, is maybe not fully unprecedented, but really quite unusual and quite radical move by the U.S. and by President Trump to seize the president, albeit most everyone agrees,
absolutely,
illegitimate president.
But Trump claims that U.S. oil companies will actually spend billions of dollars to fix the Venezuelan broken infrastructure as far as oil is concerned. Given the legal and the security risks, do you feel that private capital is actually ready and prepared to move into Venezuela to fix this infrastructure at all?
I think private capital in the U.S. and possibly other countries will be very interested. I don't think they'll move very quickly, but they will move. I mean, companies are already looking at raising the resources, as you say, to spend the billions. I mean, some estimates are over 100 billion of investment that would be required, as you say, to fix the infrastructure. And it's not just about infrastructure; it's actually the drilling, right? It's actually the oil fields themselves. Very badly managed and mismanaged and not well maintained, right? So yes, that's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. I think there is going to be a good deal of interest in it. And I think, the markets will be there to provide those resources because the reserves are so substantial. And even if the U.S. doesn't directly, control, as the president says, the flow of oil from Venezuela, as the U.S. president says, it will have a significant amount of influence over what happens. It already has had, right, through sanctions on Iran, some sanctions on Russia, and containment of some of Venezuela's export efforts, right? So the U.S. will continue to have a significant amount of influence in global markets generally, and oil in particular, not just because it's the largest producer of oil itself, but because of all of its financial reach. And I don't think that's really being undermined in a big way very quickly here. That the role of the dollar may come under more pressure over a long period of time. But I think what you're really seeing is that there isn't really an alternative to the dollar. That's why gold has been going through the roof and has continued to be under upward pressure on these events. And I think it will continue to be because there isn't an alternative, isn't a substitute for the dollar. So people are looking outside fiat currencies to hedge themselves against geopolitical risk. And, because they can't really use the renminbi or even the euro or the yen, let alone pound sterling in the same kind of way that they use the dollar.
Arnab, point taken. But let me come to you, Jayant, taking a leaf from what Arnab just mentioned, that despite the fact that there has been a clamor for de-dollarization, there isn't much of an alternative. And therefore, the dollar dominance continues, and we can see that in the rising gold prices. But, in 2018, Venezuela had said that they will free themselves of dollar dominance. There has been a clamor for de-dollarization the world over. And of course, the BRICS has also been pushing for multipolarity. Do you see the dollar dominance to continue and therefore its implications on the gold prices?
See, fundamentally, BRICS has had an agenda for de-dollarization, although India is on record to have said that it has discussed this agenda, but has never been a serious supporter of this agenda, right? Apparently because of pressure from the US itself, So I think it remains to be seen which way the de-dollarization effort or initiative would lead. So for the time being, I don't think there's any escape from US being the dominant currency, and but lots of things. If you look at when the Russian president was in India recently, I think what they agreed was that the crude oil trade between the two countries. I mean, India's import of crude oil from Russia, they would, and some other products. They said that we would try to move over to rupee ruble kind of exchange rather than a dollar exchange, right? So I think things are moving at a slow pace here and there in bits and pieces, in pairs of twos between two nations. But largely, I don't see the dominance of dollar, going away anytime soon at all. Although for the international economy, for the global economy, eventually the dominance of one currency, if it ceases, it would perhaps be good. But I don't see that seeing the light of the day any sooner,
Absolutely. Jayant, my next question to you is, Trump has actually explicitly threatened Mexico and Colombia after, this move in Venezuela. So how should, effectively the region, and these nations moving forward, the entire South America, look at this, this stance from Donald Trump? And apart from that, how should BRICS consider these statements?
So I think, President Trump is very clear when it comes to not respecting international laws, not recognizing sovereign countries' geographical borders. He's doing whatever he thinks at that point of time is the correct strategy, right? In this case itself, it was done under the garb of Venezuela supporting narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, right? And the fact is the drug reaches US and many other countries from multiple sources. Venezuela is not the only source, right? But that was used as an excuse. And eventually, what he has done is he has, he himself has talked about oil itself, that oil is also a part of the agenda, which otherwise is actually the dominant agenda. So I think all countries need to be on a little more vigilant, little more careful about dealings with the US, because what he has done in Venezuela, you can't rule out if he doesn't try out in some other countries, right? And therefore, the international criticism which has happened from large number of BRICS countries, from Latin American countries, even European Union, while they have been guarded and they have said that, they don't agree with this invasion or attack by a foreign country into another, right? But the fact is they were himself not happy with the outgoing president in Venezuela at all. They were quite perturbed the way his politics was, the way his governance was, and the way economy of the country was being run, right? So India, on the other hand, has been a very safeguarded kind of a response. India has talked about that it is concerned about the safety of the people of Venezuela, but it has fallen short of being critical of the US for invading Venezuela, right? So I think the worry is that not just these two countries that you talked about, but many other nations have to be very, very thoughtful and very, very, they really have to go back and look at, that these kind of things can happen anywhere, and not just by the US, mind you. As I said earlier, it also sort of puts a stamp on what Russia did with Ukraine, or what China has been doing geopolitically, right? So it sort of gives a license to many other big countries to try this kind of a politics, this kind of interventions, So that is very, very tragic. While there were all reasons for an intervention of this kind, which US has done in the Venezuela, I somehow, on a matter of principle, I do not support a big foreign power, or for that matter, any country invading another country and not respecting its sovereign character, nature, and its nature of governance, nature of politics, notwithstanding.
Right. Right, Arnab, were your closing comments on the fact that, just a few hours post this takeover, Trump also commented on India-US tariff and how he could accelerate tariffs on India. And these comments come, just a day after, the action in Venezuela. And we are yet to crack a deal with the US. Is that again a pressure tactic, or what could perhaps be the implications or the outcome on India-US tariff trade deal, which has been going on for a very long time now?
Yeah, look, so I think first I would say, taking a step back, this action in Venezuela, and I think President Trump has sort of tried to make this, as you say, sort of explicit, is a signal to other countries, many other countries, as you said, Mexico, Colombia, and others that are sending either drugs or immigrants, let's say, legal and illegal to the U.S., that they need to get their house in order at home in order to get out of the drug business, if that's one of them that they're in, one of the illicit businesses, and also to improve conditions at home for the domestic population so that there isn't so much supply of immigration, illegal and otherwise, into the U.S. because of the nationalist agenda of the Trump administration and the anti-immigrant bias of the MAGA support base, which is very strong issue in the U.S. as it is in Western Europe. I think the link to India and the tariffs is indirect. I don't think there's much chance, actually, that the U.S. will do something similar to what it has done in Venezuela in many other countries, right? There's also a signal along these lines, you could say, with regards to Greenland, and something that President Trump has repeatedly said. Now, many people, I think, in a way, suffer from a version of Trump derangement syndrome in saying that all these things are unprecedented, terrible ideas, and they undermine the rule of law internationally, and so on and so forth. And of course, those arguments are very valid. However, it should also be recognized that the United States has been trying to buy Greenland since 1867 on and off, right? So at least that one is that particular effort to take over Greenland through, let's call it a hostile acquisition or a friendly acquisition, as the case may be, is not entirely unprecedented, right? Now, what's happened in Venezuela isn't really an invasion. There was a pretext used of this narco-terrorism to do a lot of bombings and interdictions of seaborne traffic. And then there was an intervention in which there was, I guess you could say, a rendition of a foreign leader, maybe a sovereign leader, but one that everybody agreed, or not everybody, but many countries agreed, including most of the people of Venezuela, by most accounts, was not legitimate as the sovereign leader of Venezuela. And in fact, in a way, some of the other right-wing leaders in the Americas have actually, maybe not explicitly endorsed, but sort of come out in support of this idea by saying this is a blow for freedom, as in the case of President Milei in Argentina. So I think, these are very challenging times. Some of the actions are very unprecedented. Many of them are unusual. They're all, quite radical. But, as was said earlier in this conversation, there's a long history of U.S. interventions in Latin America and in other countries, some of which, had the imprimatur of domestic or international law, some of which were done under false pretext or turned out to be false, like the invasion of Iraq. So I think, there's a lot that's happened here, and it is radical, but I would say it doesn't necessarily change the game completely.
It is
I think
radical
what the US
indeed.
is doing here.
Yes, it is radical indeed. Point taken, Arnab. Das, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your feedback. I'm afraid we are running a little short on time, but thanks, Jayant Krishna, as well, for joining us for this conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. But let's quickly take stock of how the U.S. markets have opened up. In fact, look at the moves that are coming in on Wall Street. Dow Jones is trading up 500 points. So a percent tick up is what we see on Dow Jones. The S&P 500 is up 0.5%. And NASDAQ is also trading up 0.5%, 131